And welcome back. And today we're incredibly lucky to have with us Dr. David Joost from the University of Sydney. Well, you're currently at the University of Sydney, but he's a leading expert in the field of medieval astrology because he's been looking at the ancient manuscript texts that have been found all around the world. So welcome, David.
Thank you very much.
And first of all, I think it's very interesting for our viewers to know how did you get into astrology?
Into astrology in the first place, it was thanks to my mother when I was 15. You see, at the time I was a very bad student at school, and she thought that she should get me interested in something, and she decided to teach me astrology, and she was tremendously successful because it took me immediately, and I loved it. Yeah.
Isn't that true? When you first learn astrology, it just grabs you, and you're like, it's so exciting. But you've been able to now translate that love of astrology into the academic world, which of course in our day and age is a very unusual thing. So how did you manage to do that?
Well, when I decided to go to university at some point, and I studied medieval history, and when I had to choose a topic for my thesis, I thought, why not astrology in the Middle Ages, since I know both?
Yes.
And it is what I did.
Exactly, and I should mention you're from Brussels.
Yeah, I studied in Brussels, then I did my master at Harvard. I came back to Brussels for my PhD, then I worked in London, in Rome, in Munich, and now in Sydney.
And now in Sydney. So, as I said, we're incredibly lucky to have you here. So could you talk a little bit about this golden era of astrology and how people were living their lives during this time?
At the time, you are talking about the golden age of astrology, which I believe was between the 14th and the 16th century in Europe.
Yes.
At the time, the conception of astrology was totally different from what it is today.
Yes.
At the time, it was a fully accepted theory and practice. It was taught in university, on a regular basis. Not only in the faculties of arts, but also in the specialized faculties of medicine, of theology.
Yes.
And it was accepted as pure science by most scholars of the time, whether they were astrologers or not, like philosophers, theologians, mathematicians, astronomers, doctors. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them believed in astrology. Yeah. It was part of the conception of the universe.
Yes.
But astrology pervaded like all sectors of medieval and Renaissance life, art, medicine, philosophy, theology, all sciences, natural sciences, and also politics, because the kings, princes, popes, and bishops, they had astrologers at their service.
Exactly.
And in some cases, we know the exceptional case of Charles V, King of France.
Yes.
He had an army of astrologers around him. Yeah.
Exactly. I was also fascinated to learn that there was an election chart for St. Peter's Basilica that we have got that document.
That's right, and the horoscope is preserved. It was for the year 1506 when they not really built, but they renovated St. Peter's Basilica, and the horoscope for that renovation was made for the occasion. We also have an exceptional horoscope for the foundation of the University of Bratislava, founded in 1467, and we still have the horoscope.
From the Arab world, that a chart was drawn up for the city of Baghdad, which of course has lasted.
That's right. It's exactly the same principle.
Yes.
In that case, the Abbasid Caliph Al-Mansur wanted a new capital for the Arabic Empire, and he brought together 3 or 4 maybe astrologers to work on the most propitious date.
Yes.
And those astrologers came up with a date which is the 23rd of July 762, and we still have the horoscopes in some Arabic documents.
So how did horoscopic astrology come down to us? I mean, it started a long time ago.
Horoscopic astrology, as we know it today, based on the 4 major doctrines, the signs of the zodiac, the planets, the 12 houses, and the aspects, that kind of astrology was born somewhere in the Hellenistic world, probably, at the latest in the 1st century BC, because at the time we have plenty of evidence, horoscopes,
Yes.
texts and literary accounts. Scholars, not only astrologers, but also
Yes.
philosophers and scientists of all sorts, of all kinds, they had to flee. Well, in the first place, they just went to, more to the east, like Athens, Alexandria, or Edessa. But all these centers of learning were closed down at some point by Christian authorities. And at that point, they had to flee, astrologers, philosophers, they had to flee even further away beyond the borders of the Roman Empire, where they found refuge. Is that correct? Sorry.
Yeah, that's
refuge,
fine. Yeah.
Where they found refuge in other centers of learning, like Jundizapur in present-day Iran, or Nisibis, and other places like that.
Yes.
And astrology continued to be practiced, after the end of antiquity and in the early Middle Ages in the East, but we know very little about this period where astrology was no longer Greek, but it was Persian, Syriac, and even Sanskrit, because astrology was transmitted to India very early, actually, in history, as early as the 2nd century AD. But when the Arabs conquered the Near East and the Middle East, they came into contact with all these centers of learning, which were still functioning. And that's how they came into contact with Greek philosophy, but also astrology and other practices like magic. And at first sight, in the first place, the Arabs were not very much interested in science or knowledge. But when the Abbasid dynasty came into power in the middle of the 8th century, they were very much, and they started to translate Greek, Syriac, Persian, and even Sanskrit texts into Arabic. And in less than a century, I would say by the end of the 9th century, almost all major Greek astrological texts existed in Arabic. There are literally thousands of Latin astrological manuscripts preserved today and disseminated in European libraries. We know very little about this Latin medieval literature because basically it hasn't been studied. Most texts are unpublished, they are uncatalogued, and we don't know what is in those manuscripts, while we know very well Greek, ancient Greek astrology, because it has been studied and studied again, translated, but it's not at all the case for medieval astrology. And this also applies to the Arabic world. Arabic manuscripts are very little known.
Yes. So it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, David. I'm sure you have this amazing life working with all these texts. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Julie.
And we'll be back after the break with your weekly horoscopes.